Good afternoon, sir, ma'am. I am Karen Faye Akas, and I am going to report about the nature and scope of educational planning and the educational planning and management process. But before we proceed to the discussion, let's watch this video first.
Malia has dreams, big dreams. To achieve them, she must have access to a quality education. This is her fundamental right. Beyond this classroom, a whole system unfolds from pre-primary to adult learning. Its goal? To help Malia and her peers build a bright future. An education system includes everything from the human resources to the policies and financing that supports it. But this system doesn't just appear like magic. Without planning, the whole education system is threatened, along with Malia's dreams. So what is educational planning? It starts with all of the relevant actors coming together to create a vision for education. They anticipate the future with the resources of today. Different tools are used throughout the planning process to highlight any problem areas and help with financing and resource allocation. At the end, the stakeholders have turned the vision into a plan of action for Malia and her peers. But let's start now, because Malia can't wait. The government and education officials must lead the way and believe in the plan. It must also stay responsive to the local context, such as the geography or demography of the local population. And what if a natural disaster hits or a conflict erupts? Planning for resilience allows the system to stay afloat. When an education system is carefully planned, the fate of millions of children is protected, and Malia can build the life of her dreams.
Planning education, building the future. As we all know, our formal education is an organized one, but we must have trained teachers to teach, and buildings and many facilities have to be put up in order to have an educational institutions function effectively. Our educational system must be arranged at every stage in such a way that it meets the needs of both individual and the nation. And this process of intelligently trying to organize education so as to respond to the needs of its recipients is is what can be termed educational planning. But first, let's define what is planning. Planning has been defined by Dror as the process of preparing a set of decisions for action in the future directed at achieving goals by optimal means. And it is also defined by Nezevich as the set of formal and rational activities that seek to anticipate conditions, directions, and challenges at some future points in the time for the purpose notes of enhancing the readiness of the personnel and organization to perform more effectively and to attain relevant objectives by optimal means. From these views, it can be summarized that planning refers to the act of deciding in advance what is to be done, how and when to do it, where and who is to do it in order to achieve the goals or the objectives of the system. Most people prefer to describe or define it as to make plans. They emphasize the plans as the product of planning. If a plan has been prepared, it means that they have done planning. However, planning means more than the development of plans. It is a process resulting to a product, but plan and the process of preparing the plan are future oriented. Planning seeks to gain some control over the future developments. So let's proceed to the definition of educational planning. And it is defined as the process of determining the objectives of education, educational institutions or educational programs, and the means like activities, procedures, resources, and etc. for attaining them. And it is also defined as the process of making arrangements or preparations to facilitate the training, instruction, or study that leads to the acquisition of skills or knowledge or the development of reasoning and judgment. Educational planning and decision making, like planning in the other sectors, is a complex, interactive process involving the many policy making, technical, and administrative bodies of the national and provincial levels. The general purpose of the national educational planning in any country is to assist and facilitate the development of the educational system. At minimum, this task includes linking education to the economy, culture, and society, and it is also maintaining the integrity of the system in order that the different levels and kinds of education reinforce one another, and developing a system which monitors its own performance and responds accordingly. So let's proceed to the nature and scope of educational planning. The following viewpoints have been utilized by experts to understand and explain the meaning and nature of planning. First, we have forecasting. Educational planning is describing or defining the determining events, conditions, and needs of some future points in time. It implies forecasting and some projections of important factors in education such as number and types of students and expansion of facilities needed by them. Second is the interpretation. Educational planning should also call for interpretation of futures data and its translation into competencies, or it is also operational capabilities demanded to maintain effectiveness under the condition anticipated. Next is the goals and objectives. Educational planning is a means of generating relevant present and future goals and objectives for the organization. So we should have goals and objectives. Next is the decision making. Educational planning is the preparation or precourses courses or pre-courses in the decision-making process. It is also to help determine the optimal decision or choice rendered. While educational administration is mostly decision-making, planning in education is only the other side of it. Next is the operations optimization. Educational planning is optimization or performance improvement. It is for the enhancement of existing condition rather than those that exist in the uncertain future. It is to guide the actions of the operations. It must result also into standard operating procedures, operations manuals, administrative guidelines or system, and policies. Next is the problem prevention. Educational planning is a kind of contingency, anticipation, or problem prevention. So it should minimize the magnitude of an educational problem likely to be encountered at some future point in time. So it should spell out the procedures to be followed if some crisis or contingencies arise. Next, 7 is the management change. Educational planning is a part of organization renewal. So, other forecasting techniques are part of the process of the educational planning. It provides mechanism, a model, or a tool for achieving specific objectives of an organization. Next is the complexity resolution. Educational planning is complexity resolution, a process for coordination and control. So, it is interpreted as means of coping with complexity or coordination as facets of such projects. So let's proceed now to the educational planning and management process. Educational planning process by Britomode in 1991. First, his planning process was plan and survey deliberations. Next to the plan and survey deliberation is the definition of the goals and objectives. So you should have your goal and objectives, just like when we write a lesson plan or make a lesson plan. We should have an objectives. Next is the program design and specification. So the programs should be designed for instance, in high school, uh, elementary for basic education, and for the college institution. Next is the program provision, and fifth is the implementation and control of the educational planning process. And last is the plan evaluation and plan regeneration. So, planning, as I said earlier on, is a process of deciding in advance that we should be done in the future, how it is to be done, and who will do it, and when and where to do it. This process takes into consideration past trends and present experiences in order to project in the future. Next is the education planning by Broad. First is the statement of educational objectives. The educational objectives must be identified and clearly stated. It is very important. This will ensure that there is no confusion about the objectives. Next is the identification of various activities. The various activities which are needed to be achieved the stated objectives must be clearly identified. And last is the evaluation of results. Evaluation should be related to the stated objectives. The process of setting out in advance a pattern of action to bring about overall changes as viewed by the national policies by the closest possible articulation of means and ends. So it is a basic management task. It means of achieving higher level of effectiveness. Its uniqueness lies in the future orientation or anticipation made. The complexities of modern technology in society have given rise to the need of planning in education. Planning bridges the gap between where we are and where we want to be. Simple as well as complex methodologies are available to assist each stage of the process. Effective planning requires relevant and reliable data, both as feedback to assist adjustments and also to allow meaningful budget development. Matching priorities to a that feasible budget is a crucial step in the process, without which planning has a little potential for influencing change. And these are the references of my report. And this weekly task is to share your learnings, realization, discoveries, or insights on the topics being discussed with 500 words maximum. Thank you for listening and God bless.